So the Medium is now officially out, and I have a lot to say about it. I've been playing a review copy. I've been sitting on this for a minute, and I want to dive into this game in a different way. If you've been watching this channel for a minute now, you know that here I like to talk about what I like, stuff that excites me about video games and movies or whatever. So with the Medium, it's a game that I actually don't really totally recommend. Not the biggest fan of a lot of it. If you want to see why, I go more in depth on the game ranks before you buy. But basically, the game was based on story, and the story and characters didn't really grip me. The gameplay wasn't very challenging or really very compelling. And then story-wise and just everything, just when it felt like the game started to get going, it ended. It was very short. It is not a bad game. It doesn't technically fail. It's not a complete mess or shit show or anything like that. But it's also just not amazing. I beat it and I was like, huh, okay. So I wanted to come here and talk about the stuff on paper, because on paper, the Medium is great. And it excites me for what Bloober Team, the developers who made Layers of Fear and stuff, what they could do for the future. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. And I also want to have a conversation with you guys about Xbox Game Pass games and single player narrative linear type games like this, and where they exist on this platform, and what makes a game just kind of like a Game Pass game and not a game you run out and buy. There's a whole conversation to be had there first, but what does excite me about the Medium and what was really cool about it is the aesthetic. The whole dual plane thing, as you probably have seen in the trailers and stuff, the main character, Marianne, exists in two realities. She can kind of go to the John Constantine hell world while also existing in her own world. So you control the character through both sometimes, and that's where puzzles and little tricky things like that come in. I wasn't challenged by the puzzles at all, really. I wish they were a little bit more exciting, but that concept of the dual plane thing was very cool and unique. So if there's anything I am going to remember about the game, it's that. In a game that I felt ultimately wasn't very memorable, that concept is really cool. And just from a technical standpoint, when it shifted to another world, sometimes there was texture pop in here and there, but ultimately just seeing that in motion is wow, they had a crazy idea here and they were able to technically execute it on, PC and the newer gen consoles. I want to see more games mess around with this concept in different ways. I don't want it to become a gimmick or anything, but just the execution here was cool, but gameplay wise, it didn't add enough for me, but visually it was sweet. And I guess while we're talking about visuals, I do think this game looked pretty damn good. Some of the character faces and the movement were a little stiff, but aesthetically, this game is insane. I took so many screenshots of this game. So really good video game woods. I think Blair Witch, I went back and forth with how the woods looked. It didn't look like an East Coast woods to me, like the Blair Witch Project movie, but ultimately I think they made a good spooky video game woods. And here, I think Bloober Team should be commended on how they make horror game woods. I know it's a stupid thing to talk about, but it just excites me, so humor me here. The woods in this game, do you remember playing, say maybe you played the Resident Evil 1 remake? The first time you step outside, maybe it's in the back courtyard or the side door steps, and there's the light, and you're wow, holy shit. The moonlight streaming through the trees, the dead trees swaying in the breeze, you hear the ravens. Basically, every time you're outside at night in this game, it's like that. So, as a horror game fan, just that's good shit. It's a game world where, the game's essentially, you could call it, it's kind of reductive, but you could call it a walking simulator. It's a lot of walking, investigating, talking, solving puzzles. You can sprint. I found myself almost walking through this entire game just because of the way it looked. Not to mention the fact that the camera angles, you cannot control the camera. There are static, fixed camera angles and cinematic camera angles that follow you in certain ways. And yes, that is very old school survival horror, and I love that here. It was really, really well done, and it added to the whole thing where I said before, where I just stopped and took so many screenshots at points, because just some of the way they frame the character as you're moving in environments, how they set up reveals of new locations are just stunning. Also, as much as the story didn't do it for me, I think what hurt the most about it was that I saw what else they could do with it. In the beginning, the tone is a little different, and they touch on so much weird stuff. Maybe not weird, but just stuff you don't normally see tackled in video games. But the game didn't really go far enough with a lot of it. Maybe because it was short. Maybe because the way a lot of the stuff was hidden in notes. I don't know really for sure why, but it tackles like Polish history. It intersects with some Nazi stuff, socialism. There's like creepy, weird murder, spy stuff in the game. There's pedophilia. It tackles a lot of topics, and it's kind of wild, but it just never really, But I still want to commend them for taking on interesting topics like that and explore them in a horror game. A horror game that isn't scary, but it has good tension and mood throughout, at least. I like the fact that they didn't just be like jump scares every 5 minutes. They just made a game that is a little spooky. Also, I do want to point out props to Troy Baker, someone who is in a lot of video games, got to do a role here that I thought was awesome. Essentially, it's Troy Baker being able to do like the Mike Patton, the Darkness voice. If you played the Darkness, he goes kind of wild with it, and it was so much fun to listen to. Although some of the things connected with his character, like chase scenes and some of the light stealth elements, were a bit of a bummer and sometimes a little frustrating, I still found some of it interesting. But all these elements coupled together made me play through the game. I beat it almost in one sitting, and then when it ended, I was like, oh, okay. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but the way the game ends, I wasn't too crazy about it. There's part of it that I respect, and part of it I'm like, okay, whatever. But if they make the Medium 2 or a new Medium game with this concept in this universe with a new character or something like that, I think they could blow it out of the water just because of what I was saying here. On paper, really cool. The fact that a Silent Hill composer did some of the music, the fact that it has fixed camera angles like old school third-person horror games, the fact that it is a third-person horror game, not survival horror, but still a third-person game. I love third-person linear experiences. The fact that it looks incredible, the dual reality thing and how that can be interesting, although it didn't go far enough, and a developer that's willing to tackle weird, wild shit in their stories, even though that didn't go far enough either. A sequel could blow that shit out of the water. You can tell there's a lot of passion behind this game. Like, this was a game that they worked a long time on. Some of the story elements, some of the stuff, like, you could tell that they really wanted to do something here. The art direction, everything is so inspired and really well done, which is why I've had trouble talking about this game and the before you buy and how I made it. And I was like, it's just whatever. It's not amazing. It's not bad. It's just kind of okay. So that's why I could be excited for a sequel. I like the developers a lot. And it also leads to the question where I say to a lot of people, if you like horror games and if you have Game Pass, you should at least check it out to see these cool ideas, to see these cool elements. That's the thing, like, props to this game. For someone who really loves Steam, this game is also on Steam, but it's on Steam for $50, so it's much harder to recommend there, When you're already paying for Game Pass, if you have Game Pass on PC or Xbox, you can essentially be subjected to more games because it's like Netflix. You just scroll and you go, oh, what's that? I'm not totally committed to it, but I'll press play. That's what this game kind of is. I've seen a lot of my colleagues and peers say this is a Game Pass game, and I've thought a lot about like what that means. I feel like it's, on the one hand, maybe Game Pass is good for games like this to, exist and flourish, where otherwise, if they were just, sent out to die on the shelf for $60, no one knows about it, or no one wants to spend $60 on an 8-hour game, maybe Game Pass is good for that. But on the other hand, I also don't want Game Pass to be like a dumping ground, so to speak, where it's like, yeah, this game's all right, it's a little short, it could have been better. Game Pass is like, I feel like we're going to want better stuff on Game Pass. I feel like we're going to want more out of single player narrative experiences, stuff like Hellblade. So you have two things where Plague Tale: Innocence, a game I absolutely love, really kind of flourished and got a lot more attention when it was on Game Pass, where Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice was just kick-ass already, and then they put it on Game Pass, and then it went even higher than that. I don't know really what I'm getting at with this. I just wanted to talk out the concept of Game Pass games and the value of games, because I don't always like to equate hours spent in game to dollars spent on game. I think sometimes that's very subjective and up to the player, their preference, their wallet. So I think the Game Pass thing is kind of all over the place. So if this is like, a lot of people were treating this as like the first Xbox Series X next-gen game thing, from that angle, yeah, I'm disappointed. But from the other angle, at least it's on Game Pass, I don't know. I have no conclusion. I have no like full hypothesis about this, but I just wanted to pass it off to you guys. Like, what do you think about games just being sent out to Game Pass, even if they're not that great, but they're games that maybe you love like me. Single player, linear, narrative games. Do you think the landscape is changing? Do you think less and less we're going to see $50, $60 single player story games that, don't maybe necessarily find a large audience just end up on Game Pass? And are you cool with that? Or are you somebody who's still holding on to the physical era, which I completely respect? Who are you? What type of player are you? And what do you think about this stuff? That's what I got. That's what I've been thinking. I've been wanting to talk about this game because some of it is so cool, but ultimately, bummer. Let me know what you're thinking about either the medium or just the Game Pass topic. There's a lot to talk about, so I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Maybe we can tailor it to another interesting topic video in the future. But I just want to say thanks for coming here. And if you clicked on this video just expecting me to rag on the medium, it's not what I do here. So I'm glad you are here. And if you've watched to this point, thank you. Also, if you did get to the end, as a reward, in certain random frames of this video, there are codes for the medium to download, be it on Xbox or Steam. So maybe you caught those. Maybe you could try it for yourself, see what you think. Couple free games. You're welcome. But thank you guys for coming here. Clicking the like button seriously helps me out what I'm trying to do over here. Thank you. But I'm Jake Baldino. Thanks for watching. Subscribe because video games.